My fusion system, fusing 1,000 chickens at the start. Chapter 611, a one-sided situation. The enemy has already mobilized all their forces. Let's go all out. Dragons, leave your compatriots to yourselves. Watson's eyes were ice-cold as he clapped his hands. His voice spread far and wide with his combat aura. Frigga had not only attacked his two masters but also his subordinates. That made his killing intent toward Frigga increase continuously. He hated people who hurt his family and friends. At that moment, Frigga had crossed the line repeatedly. Yes, Dragon Emperor. The Dragon Kings in the sky agreed and flew toward the Winter Nation's army. Among them were Odyssey, Fafnir, and Nidhogg. Their expressions were hideous. They knew that someone controlled their fellow dragons. That was why they would fight against the Black Moon Knights. That person had dared to control the dragons and attack their most respected dragon emperor. They must have wanted to court death. Then, giant dragons appeared among the shining stars in the sky. There were as many as 1,000,000 of them. Those dragons came from various dragon lairs, and Fafnir's nest was huge. After all, Watson had developed a diamond tier breeding potion for them. Dark Dragon King, you're controlled by the Winter Nation. You're a disgrace to our race. The first to arrive was the Light Dragon King, Odyssey. He was not on good terms with the Dark Dragon King. He laughed when he realized that the Winter Nation controlled the Dark Dragon King. They laughed at him, but his movements were not slow. The wings on his back expanded, and his body grew, turning into a light dragon with a body comparable to the sun. He collided with the Dark Dragon God. Cut the crap, Odyssey. Hurry up and remove the chains around my body. If you can't do it, it'll be too embarrassing for you. The Dark Dragon King opened his mouth and snorted coldly. He raised his massive claws and grabbed the neck of the divine dragon that Odyssey had transformed into. The two giant dragons rolled around where the Winter Nation's army was. Whenever its body passed, the Winter Nation soldiers turned into bloody mist and meat paste, just like ants that had been trampled to death. The Winter Nation soldiers, who had been excited and felt like there was some hope in the battle, revealed expressions like they had lost their loved ones. The Dark Dragon King did not kill as many Black Moon Knights as Winter Nation soldiers. When the Dark Dragon King and the Light Dragon King were entangled, the other dragons followed suit. One after another, they found the controlled dragons and dealt with them. The dragons were like huge meat grinders, devouring the Winter Nation soldiers. Thanks to Watson, the Holy Dragon Kingdom had merged into the Kingdom of Kings, making the space infinite. Otherwise, the bodies of those huge dragons could fill up the entire Holy Dragon Kingdom. The Winter Nation had lost more than half of their troops in just a few short minutes. Empress Gustav could no longer stand it. She stood up, raised the scepter in her hand, and said, "If this goes on, we will be annihilated. In the name of Empress Gustav, I call upon our ancient ancestors, the gods of ice and snow giants, to grant us protection." The ground beneath the Winter Nation army shattered. A layer of sky-blue cold current gushed out from the ground and blew in all directions. Wherever it passed, the ground froze into the shape of a glacier. At some point in time, snowflakes began to fall from the sky. It seemed like the world was about to return to the Ice Age. In the midst of the cold, a crystal-clear arm extended from the ground. The arm was made entirely of ice crystals. The 5 fingers on the arm were 5 icebergs. The huge ice arm gripped the ground fiercely and pulled it into pieces. Then, the arm extended higher, and the entire body extended out of the ground. It was hard to describe how massive the body was. Its entire body was made of 10,000-year-old solid ice, as if the chill that would turn the Earth back into an ice age came from its body. There were no facial features or gender-distinguishing features on its face, only a towering body that reached into the clouds and a terrifying aura that was full of intimidation. Most of the kingdoms that could survive for hundreds of years were well established. Just like the Holy Dragon Kingdom that had the protection of the primordial Demoness and the 7 gods in the past, the Winter Nation also had the gods' protection. The god that protected them was the giant creature in front of them, the god of the snow giants. The humans in the Winter Nation were not simple. A part of the giants' bloodline flowed through their bodies. Harold, who had been sent to the Holy Dragon Kingdom to participate in the exhibition competition, was a genius who possessed the bloodline of the snow giant. The Winter Nation army can't fight against those black armored soldiers and the dragons. So what if the god is here? Empress Gustiano muttered to herself, the corners of her mouth rose slightly. With the god's help, the Winter Nation would definitely be able to turn the tide of the battle. After she summoned the god of the snow giants, the god opened his giant palm of ice. She picked up the Dark Dragon King and the Light Dragon King, who were rolling around on the ground, and threw them out. If she could throw out such a huge and powerful creature like the Dark Dragon King, would it not be easy to deal with a mere Black Moon Knight? With that thought in mind, Empress Gustav stretched the scepter in front of her. Go, god of the snow giants! Let those people see how powerful you are. Let them understand the glory of ice and snow. Crack! Before she could finish her words, a violent cracking sound came from above her head. She raised her head in surprise and looked up at the god of the snow giants, who was thousands of meters high above her head. At that moment, a thick and long crack appeared on her neck, and the crack spread to her entire body. A man in clown makeup stood on the god of the snow giant's neck and talked to himself. The Dragon Emperor built that kingdom. In other words, it is my property belonging to the Dragon clan. Why did you appear and change the terrain? That is a violation of my rights and interests. Do you want to die? Even though he did not seem to use any strength, the clown-like man had an irresistible force under his feet, stomping on the god of the snow giant's body. That is impossible. Empress Gustav's face was filled with shock. The god of the snow giants was the ancestor of the ice giants, a powerful starlight tier existence. Its body was entirely made up of ice elements. Even if it was destroyed, it could quickly reassemble and control the ice elements in the world. However, at that moment, she could feel the trembles coming from the god of the snow giant's body as if it was terrified of the man standing above its head. Who was the man who could make a starlight tier ancient giant feel fear? I'm talking to you. It's polite to respond when others are speaking to you. Are you ignoring me? The clown-like man was still nagging. He reached out his hand and pressed it on the god of the snow giant's head. A blazing planet, glowing with light, appeared in the man's hand. It spun and grew larger. That was an actual planet. It crushed the god of the snow giant's head the moment it appeared. Then, the planet expanded, and its body collapsed, leaving a massive crater on the ground. The Winter Nation soldiers in the crater had evaporated. They gulped. The snowflakes in the sky were still falling. The god of the snow giants had already disappeared without a trace. The Winter Nation soldiers stared blankly at everything in front of them. They looked like they were in despair. The god of the snow giants was their totem and their guardian god. If the man could destroy the god easily, then it must be very easy for the man to destroy them. Chapter 612, The Primordial Demoness and the Demoness Bandit Gang. Just as the soldiers of the Winter Nation fell into despair, something even more desperate happened not far away. The Dark Dragon King, who was fighting with the Light Dragon King, took the opportunity to untie the chains around his body. He looked at them with hatred in his eyes. You lowly humans, how dare you enslave me to attack the Dragon Emperor? You deserve to die. The Dark Dragon King opened his mouth, and darkness covered the sky. The soldiers from the Winter Nation clutched their throats in pain and fell to the ground, green smoke rising from their bodies. Then, the bodies vaporized and disappeared. The Winter Nation troops had been reduced to less than 500,000 after the battle. Then, after the Dark Dragon King's attack, fewer than 300,000 soldiers were left. The remaining soldiers had lost the confidence to fight. The timid ones even threw away the weapons in their hands and started to retreat. Empress Gustav cast a pleading look at Frigga, who was in the air. At that point, she did not have any good ideas. It's as I expected. The Winter Nation may seem mighty, but in reality, they don't have much combat strength. I'm very disappointed with your performance, so let me increase your strength. Supernatural evolution power, restrictions removed. The light of the elven race chess pieces in Frigga's hands grew stronger and stronger, shining on the Winter Nation's soldiers. Those who had already evolved once evolved again, and lumps of flesh grew on their bodies. Their bodies exploded and turned into minced meat on the ground. They fused into a colossal wriggling ball of blood, which looked disgusting. Even Empress Gustav was no exception. Her body swelled and became ugly, which made her look terrified. No, Frigga, you can't do this to me. We agreed that as long as I help you achieve your wish, you'll take me to live with you in the future. I did say that, but I haven't succeeded yet, have I? After I achieve my wish, I will definitely resurrect you and fulfill your wish. Before that, you can contribute your strength to me. Empress Gustav cried and shouted, no. Blood rained from the explosion of her body merged into the blood ball in the air. Supernatural evolution product, Godslayer's blood. Effect, blood that has evolved to the extreme and has the ability to kill gods. After Frigga created the blood ball monster, the relevant information appeared in Watson's eyes. You even harmed your own teammate. Isn't that too cruel? Are you still human? Even though he knew that Frigga was a cruel person, it was still a shock seeing her kill Empress Gustav without changing her expression. It looked like she had turned into a monster. Cruel? Watson, that wasn't cruel. That was rational use of power. Compared to me, your method of using power was too childish. If I had the power in your body, I would have fused everyone in the world to become an incomparably powerful existence. All the resources in the world would also be under my control. At that time, not to mention the world, even the gods would have to fear me. I would be above all gods. Frigga opened her arms and laughed maniacally in a high-pitched voice. You're so pitiful. Facing the hysterical Frigga, Watson did not feel angry. Instead, pity appeared in his eyes. He could understand Frigga's thoughts. If she obtained the fusion system, she would fuse everything within her sight until she became the strongest person in the world. Doing so could indeed maximize the use of the system's abilities, but it was also very lonely. Fusing everything around her, she was destined to lose her family, friends, and loved ones. If there was no one around her, she would not even have someone to talk to, then what was the point of having a life, even if she became the strongest? Watson sighed and walked toward Frigga. He wanted to take care of Frigga personally. He could not let her escape. Frigga waved her hand. The Godslayer's blood that she had just extracted from the Winter Nation's soldiers immediately flew toward Watson. The surging blood contained a strong killing intent, it wanted to wrap Watson within it. Molecular deceleration. Before the blood touched Watson, Nia's voice came from the sky. 12 wings spread out from infinite wings wrapped around the blood ball. From the outermost layer, a layer of solid ice covered the blood ball. Watson turned around and nodded to Nia. He did not stop walking. Petrifying eyes. The second person to stop Watson was the Primordial Demoness, standing beside Frigga. The scarlet eyes on her body opened, and rays with petrifying functions appeared in the air. They interwoven into a dense network and enveloped Watson's body. Just as the petrifying rays were about to touch Watson's body, a few beautiful girls in maid attire flew out of the Black Moon Castle. They opened their hands and deflected the petrifying rays. Money enhancement. Invisible hand. The maids were the Demoness bandit gang leaders that Watson had subdued at the border. Previously, Watson had sent Lust to the planetary fortress to be the boss of the Everything House. However, not all the higher UPS of the bandit gang had been sent out by him. There were still some who remained in Black Moon Castle. At that moment, those diamond tier maids flew to the sky. Their bodies emitted a strong aura of desire, they confronted the Primordial Demoness. As the Primordial Demoness' former believers, no one understood her ability better than them. Aren't you all my former believers? Are you going to resist me? The primordial Demoness swept her gaze across greed, gluttony, and the others who had tried to stop her. Her heads let out a mocking laugh. Don't forget who gave you your ability. You want to use the power that I gave you against me? You're overestimating yourselves. Give up your resistance. As long as you give up and believe in me again, I can re-establish the Demoness Church and make you all the new saintesses of the church. The primordial Demoness' words were seductive, like the whisper of a devil. It made people subconsciously want to agree, but Lady Greed, Gluttony, and the others who stood in front of her were unmoved. The primordial Demoness said that she wants us to believe in her again, and she also wants us to be saintesses. What do you think? Greed tossed a coin in her hand, the corners of her mouth raised, and a faint smile appeared on her face. Is it better to believe in the primordial Demoness than to believe in young Master Watson? Can she let us live a life where we don't have to do anything every day, and we can get food, clothes, and even treasures just by moving our fingers? I haven't finished reading Miss Margaret's latest novel yet. Let's hurry up and get rid of that guy and go back to reading. The higher UPS of the bandit gang frowned coldly, their bodies gradually expanding as they spoke. They had used Fury's ability, Goliath. I'm so sleepy. I want to sleep. Gluttony was not far away from her, lazily lying on the soft pillow. There was snot in her nose as she stretched lazily. She did not even open her eyes. Chapter 613, The Archduke's Betrayal. The primordial Demoness' expression turned ugly. It seems like everyone has the same thoughts as me. Greed grabbed the coins in her hands and released her unique ability, Money Amplification. A layer of glorious golden light enveloped them. Money Amplification could use the power of money to increase the strength of others. The more gold coins were used, the greater the increase. As Mount Creation's maids, they had already obtained unimaginable wealth in the few years they had lived there by using the Wish for the World ring to travel the world. At that moment, after using all their wealth, their strength had risen to the peak of the diamond tier. They were also capable of fighting against the starlight tier primordial Demoness. Young Master Watson, leave this place to us. Go. Watson nodded and did not say anything else. He knew that that was a matter between the Demoness bandit gang and the primordial Demoness. The primordial Demoness had not aided in the abolition of the Demoness Church. When they became bandits, the primordial Demoness did not protect them either. The one who had given them warmth and home was Watson. The primordial Demoness had appeared again when he needed their help. What did the primordial Demoness do for them back then? No matter what the primordial Demoness said, they would not listen to her. The faith they had in the past had long died. At that moment, they only had one faith, and that was in Watson. Do you think you can stop me? The foreheads of the primordial Demoness rotated in turn. Her face was full of contempt. She knew the abilities of those bandits, and she was stronger than those people. As she spoke, the primordial Demoness' body expanded. From 100 meters, she became a 1,000-meter-long giant. Around her scarlet eyes, transparent arms appeared. Those were the invisible arms of laziness. They had the effect of making those who were caught faint. At that moment, the number of invisible arms around her was no less than 10,000. They were densely packed and floating in the air, distorting the air. It was not an exaggeration to say that if those invisible arms were used simultaneously, they could even lift Mount Creation. The maids' expressions changed as they faced the powerful primordial Demoness. They were not confident that they could withstand such a powerful attack. They might not be enough. What about me? A cold voice came from the air. Nia, who had just frozen the God-Slayer's blood, flapped her 12 wings gently and went before the primordial Demoness. Nia, the King of Angels, also had a solemn expression on her face. On the other hand, the elves, who had been endlessly transformed by Frigga's supernatural power and had become giant monsters like the World Tree, also began to move at that moment. Thick branches extended out from their trembling bodies, and they began to move toward Watson. Some of the branches even bloomed with beautiful flowers. Colorful pollen fluttered in the wind. The pollen contained lethal poison. The grass on the ground would wither, and the rivers would dry up. Many of the Black Moon Knights had accidentally absorbed the pollen, and their bodies quickly turned into puddles of blood. Fortunately, they had eternal life, so they could be resurrected after their death. Just as the giant monster was about to arrive in front of Watson, Nidhogg, who had just crushed the god of snow giants, appeared above the head of the beast with a hesitant look. "You can't participate in the battle against the Dragon Emperor. Your opponent is me." Tentacles made of tree branches and vines flew out of the body of the elven monster, trying to entangle Nidhogg. However, Nidhogg dodged it easily with just a few flashes. Instead, he muttered, "The elves who had already left the appearance of the tree spirits did not expect to return to the appearance of the ancient tree spirits. In the distant past, I've lived many similar existences. I don't know how many years it's been since I've experienced that. It looks like I'll be able to experience it again today." Spreading his wings, Nidhogg transformed into a massive dragon with starlight wrapped around its body. It opened its huge mouth full of fangs and bit the monster. Painful wails accompanied the dark green liquid as it bit into the elf monster. Nidhogg lifted the world tree-like body into the air. Once upon a time, there was a ferocious dragon in the world, famous for gnawing on world trees. That evil dragon was called Nidhogg. At that moment, the scene of it soaring into the sky could be seen clearly in the entire Holy Dragon Kingdom, also known as the Kingdom of Kings. Many people were shocked. At the capital of the former Holy Dragon Kingdom, the war has begun. That child is good at everything, but he is too stubborn. He must get what he wants. Otherwise, he would rather destroy it. I wonder who will win this war. The old king stood in the Sword Saint's courtyard. In front of him, Christina held a long sword and pointed it at him angrily. "What happened? Where are my father and Master Antonio?" Some time had passed since Antonio and Reed were schemed against by Frigga. After learning about that, Christina no longer wanted to act with the old king. She chose to show her cards. She knew that her father and Antonio's disappearance must have something to do with King Landar III. She did not know if the old king was involved. It was not just Christina. The other disciples in the Sword Saint's courtyard were also there. They pointed their long swords at the old king. Their eyes were filled with sorrow. They are currently sleeping in a quiet place. If Watson can win the fight, they might have a chance to survive. Otherwise. By the way, don't point your swords at me. I am already an old man. When I see so many weapons, I will be very nervous. When I am nervous, I will easily do something impulsive. Laughing, the old king took a step forward. His stooped body straightened as his feet touched the ground. With a boom, a hole was blasted in the ground, and a powerful aura at the peak of the diamond tier spread out in all directions. Other than Christina, the other Sword Saint's disciples all took a few steps back with disbelief on their faces. At that moment, the battle strength displayed by the old king was even more powerful than the Sword Saint Reed. "I've been in prison for too long. Fortunately, my strength hasn't deteriorated." The old king stretched his muscles and bones. At that moment, his eyes turned from turbid to bright and full of color, and his figure also became much taller. He clapped his hands as he spoke. "Clap! Clap! Your Majesty, the Campbell family, has come to rescue you. Watson had placed you under house arrest here, we've let you suffer during all this time." The head of the Campbell family, Armand Campbell, led many elite members to the courtyard. He knelt on one knee and spoke respectfully to the old king. Behind him, the head of the Ptolemy family, Daniel, was also there. He knelt on one knee and said, "Your Majesty, the Ptolemy family has been waiting here for a long time. We are ready to welcome your Majesty's release." Chapter 614, Capturing the Sword Saint Family. "Hey, you! What are you trying to do?" Do you want to make enemies with the Sword Saint family? Both of your families had dealings with Watson. Are you trying to betray us? Christina watched everything in front of her as her expression changed. She saw Augustus' figure in the Campbell family and Lana and Casey. At that moment, Casey was shouting toward the Ptolemy family. Father, are you planning to take advantage of the time when Watson is fighting with His Majesty to join hands with the late king to uproot Watson's influence in the capital? I advise you not to do that. Watson is a monster. Even if His Majesty gathers the power of the Elven Kingdom and the Winter Nation, they might not be able to defeat him. He might even destroy those two kingdoms. He will become even stronger. Father, listen to my advice. Let's stop. Shut up. He stood up, turned around, and gave Casey a hard slap. Daniel's face was full of anger, and he looked like he hated the fact that his son had failed to live up to his expectations. How did I have such a useless son like you? How can you say such words in front of the late king? Are you courting death? He also understood that Watson was mighty. After all, Watson had planned to make a deal with him to sell him the Diamond Tier Dragon Transformation Potion. He could resist the temptation of the Dragon Transformation Potion by choosing to join hands with King Landar III. He had weighed the pros and cons for a long time. Previously, he and Casey had some disagreements with Watson. If Watson were to become the future king, the Ptolemy family would have to act according to Watson's wishes. On the contrary, if King Landar III were to win, he would revoke Watson's title. When that time came, the Ptolemy family would have rendered meritorious service in protecting the kingdom in times of crisis, and they could take it one step further. I remember a similar incident happened more than 10 years ago in the Holy Dragon Kingdom. At that time, the kingdom had put out an all-out arrest warrant for the Primordial Demoness followers, exterminating the Demoness Church. At that time, the Demoness Church's influence was not inferior to Watson's today. It was also spread throughout the entire kingdom and was deeply ingrained in the people's hearts. Didn't His Majesty King Landar III still remove it? I wonder if this is a similar situation. Daniel's eyes flickered. As the head of one of the 3 Archdukes' families, he was very good at judging the situation and taking sides. In his opinion, Watson's chances of winning that battle were not high. Armand thought the same too. After the old king raised his hand to signal for him to stand up, Armand stood up and said, "Augustus, as long as we capture those people, even if Watson wins, we will have no choice but to surrender, right? After we get rid of Watson, you'll still be the strongest genius in the kingdom. The title of the strongest genius is no longer important to me. As long as there's a chance to defeat Watson, I'm okay with it." Augustus shrugged, his fiery red hair swaying in the air. As he said that, he looked at Christina and said, "Miss Christina, you're not my match. You'd better surrender obediently. Otherwise, it won't be good if I hurt you later. There's no such thing as surrendering in the Sword Saint family. Previously, you relied on the power of the Holy Relic to defeat me. I wonder if you'd still be my match after being resurrected by Watson." Christina strode forward with a determined expression, extending her hand to block the Sword Saint's disciples behind her. Above her head, a giant earthen yellow dragon fell from the sky. On the dragon's back stood numerous sharp spikes in the shape of a giant sword, accompanied by a deafening dragon's cry. That dragon was the companion she had obtained in the dragon lair, the Diamond Tier Sword King Mountain Dragon. As the dragon descended, Christina raised her right hand and lightly shouted, "Dragon Fusion!" With a soft sound, the Sword King Mountain Dragon turned into a ray of light and coiled around her body, causing her yellow hair to glow with a golden light. As it fluttered in the wind, her pupils became vertical, and a thick layer of rock armor appeared on her body. Even her cheeks were covered with traces of the armor. In her right hand, a giant sword as thick as a door was propped on the ground. That huge sword was covered with barbs and looked like the dragon's tail. After performing the dragon fusion, Christina's aura was much stronger too. She slashed her sword in the direction of Augustus. Infinite Kingdom of Swords. As the sword fell, tens of thousands of blades appeared. Tens of thousands of sword kingdoms with colorful lights appeared before her. They crashed in all directions like waves. That powerful force shattered the Sword Saint's courtyard. The ground was also plowed into a crisscrossed abyss. She recently developed that move. Her talent might not be as good as Watson's or her father's, but she could definitely be called a genius in sword technique. The Infinite Kingdom of Swords used the power of the Kingdom of Swords one after another, and it would not stop until it was exhausted. Even a god might not be able to withstand the bombardment of sword techniques. Her best sword technique was the Infinite Sword Slash. At that moment, she fused that sword technique with the Kingdom of the Sword, creating an unprecedented path. That was a sword technique that belonged solely to her. At that moment, in the Sword Saint's courtyard, to protect her senior and junior brothers behind her, she chose to let her strongest sword technique bloom in the world. The sound of explosions rang out continuously in front of her. The Ptolemy and Campbell family members, who had been planning to capture her and force Watson to submit, ran out like stray dogs at that moment. "See, father, I told you Watson was a monster. After staying by his side for a long time, even Miss Christina has become a monster." "Shut up." The conversation between Daniel and Casey could be vaguely heard. "Augustus, protect His Majesty." "No, His Majesty is very powerful. You should come over and protect me." It seemed to be Armin's exclamation. Immediately after, the layers of the Divine Kingdom of the Sword shattered. Augustus' entire body was covered in green flames as he came out of the Divine Kingdom. Those were the flames of life. The ground that he had burned came alive one after another. He transformed into stone giants that were at least platinum tier and lifted the people from the two families. Augustus was like the god of war. The Divine Kingdom of the Sword that Christina released crushed his body, turning his body into a bloody mess. Under the exposed flesh and blood, there were holy relics with a metallic luster. "It's a diamond tier holy relic? You've been modified again." Christina's pupils constricted, and she could not help but exclaim in surprise. Usually, Augustus would not be her match after being revived by Watson. However, Augustus had fused with many holy relics and transformed into something else. The situation was different. Bearing the attack of the Kingdom of the Sword, Augustus came in front of Christina and punched her. Blood seeped from the corner of Christina's lips. She took a few steps back, and the dragon that covered her body bounced out. The dragonification was dispelled. "Watson should not have resurrected you." Christina forcefully straightened her body with her giant sword to support herself. Even at the last moment, she was unwilling to admit defeat. If the Sword Saint family members wanted to die, they would want to die on the battlefield. The power of death. A pitch-black fog appeared on Christina's body. That fog came from the death elemental magic source. Christina had not gone all out against the person in front of her. She had changed her mind. The fastest way to kill a person was through the power of death. Yes, Watson shouldn't have resurrected me at all. That way, I won't have a lot of trouble now. Augustus turned a blind eye to the power of death on Christina's body and sighed. With his back facing the two families, he raised his right hand. Deep darkness that also symbolized death flashed in his palm. "As for you, you should sleep for a while." Chapter 615, Just Icing on the Cake. "Where are the people from the Saint Laurent family? Didn't they come?" The old king reached out to sweep the dust on his body. He asked when he saw Augustus carrying Christina, who had fainted. At that moment, Christina and the other Sword Saint disciples in the courtyard had been knocked unconscious and bound with ropes. Even the maids and guards outside the courtyard were not spared. After completing the mission, Armand gave Augustus a look of approval and then said, "The Saint Laurent family did not come. In my opinion, they might be from Watson's faction." When he brought Augustus to the Sword Saint's courtyard, Augustus proposed a new modification. Otherwise, it would be difficult to break through the Sword Saints' courtyard's defensive line. According to Augustus, anyone who believed in Watson would receive a gift from Watson. As Watson's strength became stronger, those believers would also become stronger. That was not a secret in the royal city. After all, the royal city did not have the protection of the 7 gods. The church believed in Watson. Even though Armand did not believe in Watson, according to the informants he planted in the church, Watson could become stronger. According to Augustus, Watson's strength had become stronger in the past few days. He had even created several new sources of power. As someone close to him, Christina must also have obtained such power. It would not be easy to win if they fought normally. Armand did not know how Augustus had gotten the news. He did not think too much about it. As long as the result was good, it was fine. It did not matter what the process was. The Saint Laurent family did not come, but they joined Watson. Don't they know that the royal family has always been the same since the kingdom's founding? Watson is an outsider. What qualifications does he have to become the next king? They are betraying the kingdom and the royal family. Well, since they want to be with Watson, then let them die together. The old king sneered and waved his hand in a domineering manner before walking out. Follow me to the Saint Laurent family. I want to see how bold those people are. At the Saint Laurent family. Grandmother, let's send our soldiers to help the old king attack the Sword Saints' courtyard and capture those who are related to Watson. The head of the Saint Laurent family was sitting on a bench while a group of family members was kneeling in front of her. Everyone looked anxious. I heard that the Ptolemy and Campbell families have sent troops to the Sword Saints' courtyard, and their family head personally led them there. Now, all that's left is the Saint Laurent family. The current situation is very similar to when His Majesty destroyed the Demoness church more than 10 years ago. If we don't send troops now, we will definitely be hated in the future. There is a high possibility that the 3 Archduke families will become 2. Besides, we don't need to help Watson at all. Watson has never cared about the Saint Laurent family. He is also the child of the traitor that grandmother chased out. What does his situation have to do with us? The people in front of her kept asking for her opinion. The head of the Saint Laurent family narrowed her eyes and remained silent. She understood what those people were saying, but it was probably because she was old. She did not feel anything when she expelled Watson's father, Edward, from the family. However, when she saw her grandson, Watson, ostracized by the family and regarded as a thorn in the eyes of the royal family of the Holy Dragon Kingdom, she felt a trace of sadness in her heart. All of you, be quiet. Taking a deep breath, she slowly opened her mouth, intimidating the members of the Saint Laurent family who were still complaining. In my opinion, this is a good opportunity for us to ease our relationship with Watson. In the past, he has always been biased against our family because of Edward's matter. However, this time, we are on his side. Furthermore, Watson has our bloodline in his body. I believe that he will forgive us once he finds out about that. Perhaps he might even have a chance to acknowledge us as his family. Grandmother, at this time, what's the point of making him acknowledge us as his family? I heard that his 2 masters, Antonio and Reed, are currently in an unknown state. Our family probably won't be any better off with him, a few young juniors grumbled unhappily. Of course, it's meaningful. The Saint Laurent family head slammed into her chair hard and widened her eyes. What's the meaning of following the Ptolemy family and the Campbell family to attack the Sword Saints' courtyard now? If the 3 families attack together, each family will receive a reward. The balance of power between the 3 Archduke families will not be broken. It's the same effect as not attacking. If we help Watson, the effect will be completely different. Either His Majesty wins, and the 3 Archduke families become 2, or Watson wins, and Saint Laurent becomes the dominant power in the kingdom. The Saint Laurent family has been sitting in this position for a long time. It's time to take a gamble. If we continue to maintain the current situation, the Saint Laurent family will continue to decline. The royal family doesn't allow other bloodlines to be the king. Even if our family has a child of God now, can we guarantee that we'll always have a child of God in our family? Furthermore, that child of God is also on Watson's side. In the end, it was better to choose Watson. If Watson won, the Saint Laurent family would reap a huge harvest. On the contrary, choosing King Landar III would be the icing on the cake. The probability of winning was high, but the Saint Laurent family would not feel any pain after winning. Although the Saint Laurent family head was a woman, her decisiveness and foresight surpassed a man's. After saying that, all her clansmen looked at each other and did not complain. After a moment of silence, a man spoke first. That makes sense. No matter what happens to Watson, Nia is by Watson's side. I want to protect Nia. I support my mother's decision. Nia is the reincarnation of a god. Do you really think you're her father? If Nia wasn't on Watson's side, we wouldn't have to be so conflicted. We should break things off with Watson. Someone grumbled unhappily, causing Nia's father to be furious. What are you talking about? I think you're just jealous that I have such an outstanding daughter. The head of the Saint Laurent family frowned. Those people were still arguing over those unimportant matters. Just as she was about to open her mouth to stop them, a disciple rushed in from outside. Something terrible has happened, Master. There are many troops outside. Ptolemy, the head of the Campbell family, is leading them. I also saw the old king. They are rushing toward us as if they wanted to attack us. They're already here? I didn't expect them to come so quickly. The Saint Laurent family head stood up, tidied her clothes, and walked outside with her crutches. Let's welcome those distinguished guests. On another street in the royal city. Mother, I heard that Watson is currently fighting with father. Even our grandfather, the old king, was released from prison to help father destroy Watson's forces. Not far from the street was an ordinary courtyard. A young man stood at the entrance and looked outside. He saw the large army passing by and the residents fleeing in panic down the street. There were 2 young men and a middle-aged woman in the courtyard too. The middle-aged woman was holding a needle and thread in her hands and was spinning something. After hearing the young man's words, she put down the things in her hands and rubbed her sore eyes. Yes, that is already their second duel. I wonder who will win this time. With a twinkle in his eyes, the young man said, if only father could win, then I would be the second prince again. Second brother, are you still dreaming of becoming a prince? An older young man behind him said, it's about time for you to wake up. Father has no intention of passing the throne to us. He wants to be a king for the rest of his life. In order to stabilize his position, he can abandon us at any time. I didn't say that I wanted to be a king. It's better for me to be a prince for the rest of my life than to live a normal life in a place like this, right? Second brother, don't say too much. It's not up to us to decide whether to be a prince or not. Furthermore, Kiana is crying in her room right now. What if you make her even sadder? Then, they kept quiet and looked worriedly at a room in the courtyard. After learning that King Landar III and Watson were fighting again, Kiana had locked herself in her room. No one knew how she was doing then. Chapter 616, Kidnapping the Royal Family. Kiana, are you okay? Worried about his sister, the third prince put the things in his hands down and walked to Kiana's room. Kiana. He knocked on the door, but there was no sound in the room. The third prince looked worried. It was no secret that his sister liked Watson. It would be bad if Kiana did something stupid because of Watson. Worried, he pushed the door open with all his strength. The scene inside surprised him. Other than the furniture in the room, the walls, floor, and ceiling were all damaged. Kiana was no longer in the room. Mother, eldest brother, second brother, it's bad. Kiana is missing. Come quickly. Stunned for a second, the third prince then shouted. Where are you taking me? You're not trying to keep the royal family's secret from me, are you? Or you're coveting my beauty? I'm warning you. My heart belongs to the kingdom's strongest genius, Watson. Even if you torture me, don't expect me to comply. Kiana was tied up and carried by a person in black clothes. She gritted her teeth and spoke fiercely. Be quiet. The person also wore a black mask. However, from her feminine tone and the graceful curves on her chest, it was apparent that she was a woman. Since she was traveling swiftly, the wind blew past, making Kiana unable to open her eyes. She had been in the room missing Watson and feeling sad about the battle between Watson and her father. In the end, the woman rushed in and carried her away without any explanation. She had tried to resist, but unfortunately, the woman was too strong. She was no match for her. While Kiana was reminiscing, the woman arrived in front of an inconspicuous manor in the capital. They entered the manor. The scene inside was completely different from what was outside. 8 courtyards in the air overlapped with each other. They looked majestic and very luxurious. Miss Nightingale. The woman took off her mask and was immediately greeted respectfully by the people there, including Severed Fingers gang members, led by Veronica, Klein, and Elvin. As expected of young Master Watson's maidservant. She acted quickly and brought her back so quickly. Veronica clapped her hands in praise. Who are you people? Why did you capture me? Kiana stared blankly at the 8-story courtyard in the sky, as well as the many unfamiliar faces in front of her. She had been a princess for so many years, but she did not know that there was such a place in the capital. However, no one present answered. Right now, the Holy Dragon Kingdom's old king is leading people to besiege the young Master Watson's forces. According to our spies, the Sword Saint's courtyard and the Saint Laurent family have already suffered. I reckon that we will be the next ones to be attacked. Let's take the princess out of the kingdom and leave the capital. Klein sighed and said, with the princess around, even if the Holy Dragon Kingdom's army besieges us, they won't take action so easily. Since Watson became their leader, the Severed Fingers gang had become much better. Each of them was worth twice as much. The noblemen they had tried their best to curry favor with had to bow to them. Unfortunately, such a life was about to go away. King Landar III was fighting with Watson, and Watson had no time to care about them. They had to leave. If Watson won, it would be great, but if Watson were to lose, they would no longer be able to live a luxurious life and could only hide in the Holy Dragon Kingdom. Even so, none of them showed any regret. They had never regretted letting Watson become the Severed Fingers gang's leader, and even their ordinary members did not regret it. So you captured me to be your shield. How despicable! By the way, you did not capture my brothers, so why did you only capture me? Kiana's eyes widened when she heard that. Veronica glanced at her. She's too noisy. Someone seal her lips, please. Yes, Lady Veronica. One of her subordinates stepped forward and stuffed a piece of linen cloth into Kiana's mouth. A strange blush appeared on her face, but the subordinate ignored her. Lady Veronica, the things we've accumulated in the 8-story courtyard in the sky. Leave them here. As long as they're still here, we will come back for them sooner or later. She sighed with a reluctant look on her face. She took a deep breath and put on a straight face. Her expression became resolute. Everyone, set off now. Take the waterway. The sea folks are already waiting for us. Some of the ministers and noblemen from the capital will also come with us. Remember to protect their safety. Yes, Lady Veronica. At the courtyard where the princes lived. It's not good, Kiana is gone. The third prince saw the messy room and began shouting. Suddenly, an old voice came from behind him, saying, Your Highness, don't worry. The princess is fine. Instead of worrying about her, Your Highness, you should worry about yourself. Turning his head, the third prince found an old man with white hair standing behind him. He had a wise expression and a beard. Minister Makrotov. The third prince was very familiar with the old man in front of him. He was the leader of the civil officials in the Holy Dragon Kingdom. At that moment, the leader was looking at him with an unfriendly expression. A few burly old men behind him spoke impatiently, "Hurry up and tie him up and bring him to the outskirts of the city. Now that the capital is so chaotic, we will be annihilated as rebels if we are not careful. We can only capture a royal family member as our hostage." It was a pity that Kiana was assigned to another force. Otherwise, His Majesty is most fond of the princess. The best effect would be to capture her. Kidnap? The third prince's eyes widened. Did he hear it wrongly? Those ministers were discussing the matter of kidnapping him. Even if he had been expelled from the imperial palace, he was still a prince. How could they do that? What everyone said makes sense. Time is of the essence. Your Highness, third prince, please forgive me for my offense. Makrotov smiled and waved his hand. The other civil servants immediately rushed forward and carried the third prince. He made such a disrespectful move because he received news that King Landar III had broken off relations with Watson and fought with the young man at the border. The generals led by Hone had already moved to the border. He was prepared to support King Landar III, but he, who had always opposed the generals, had chosen to support Watson. His Majesty is too ridiculous. He released the old king, who had been imprisoned for a long time. Furthermore, His Majesty has been sitting on the throne for a long time. It's time to give that position to the young man. Makrotov watched as they captured the third prince, his eyes narrowing as he stroked his beard. It was only a small reason why he would support Watson and oppose the general. The more significant reason was that an incident was very similar to the Demoness church incident more than 10 years ago. As someone who had experienced the previous incident, he knew that it was a dark period and that similar things should not happen in the kingdom again. No one knew who was spreading the rumors in the capital. They said that King Landar III was no longer the king they remembered. The primordial Demoness had possessed him. He had plotted against Sword Saint Reed and Antonio, and no one knew that happened to them. It was hard to imagine what else King Landar III would do for the throne. No one knew whether the rumors were true or false. However, many ministers felt that King Landar III's actions were too cruel. Chapter 617, Spreading Rumors. Have you heard? The king and the future king are currently fighting. Someone stood at the tavern entrance and spoke to the people there. I did hear that. I also heard that they're fighting at the border. At the same time, the Elven Kingdom and the Winter Nation are also in the battle. A man in the tavern sat on a long table and wiped a bottle of golden red sun fruit wine as if he was going to open it. However, he looked up, sighed, and put down the wine in his hand. If His Majesty wants to fight Watson, I should forget about opening the tavern. The scene is so big that no one's here to drink. I've got a bottle of excellent sun fruit wine in my hand. It's a beautiful thing when everyone sits down to drink and chat, but why do we have to fight? Of course, it's for the throne. Only one person can sit on it, someone spoke up. Didn't His Majesty already announce that he would pass the throne to Watson in the future? Why would they still fight for it? Is His Majesty going back on his word? The brawny man wiping the wine bottle looked puzzled. It's not just about going back on his words. Likely, His Majesty is no longer the person he used to be. The mysterious young man standing at the door walked into the tavern and sat down with the burly man. He looked as if he knew a lot of things. He pointed at the sun fruit wine in the burly man's hand and said, "I'm a little thirsty." Forget it. No one has been drinking in the tavern recently. It's rare to meet someone who has insider information. You can have this bottle of wine as a gift. Pouring a glass of wine for the mysterious young man, the brawny man asked, "What exactly do you know? Tell me in detail." As expected of the sun fruit wine. It tastes delicious. After drinking the wine in one gulp, the mysterious young man wiped his lips. After sighing with emotion, he said, "The information I got came from the Everything House. It's absolutely true. Do you know the Everything House? The Everything House that recently appeared in the royal city and is said to know everything. I've only heard of it, but I've never gone there to buy information." Everyone, including the brawny man, shook their heads. That's a pity. There's a lot of information in the Everything House, and it's not expensive. Even the information about His Majesty only costs 1,000 gold coins. Whatever the source is, quickly get to the point. Well, according to the information I got from the Everything House, His Majesty is very likely to have been possessed by the Primordial Demoness. Think about what he has done recently. First, he wanted Watson to be the future king, but in the end, he went back on his words and attacked the border. Even Watson's two masters, Antonio and Reed, are missing at the moment. No one knows if they're alive. King Landar III released the Demoness Saintess, Queen Avril, and expelled Queen Isabella and the three princes and princesses from the palace. That is not enough to explain the problem. If the Primordial Demoness did not possess His Majesty, why would he abandon his wife and children? Furthermore, the seven gods that the Holy Dragon Kingdom worshipped previously betrayed the kingdom and no longer protect us. Is it necessary for the mighty gods to betray the kingdom? It must have been something that King Landar III did. Combined with the current situation, we understand that the Primordial Demoness must have possessed His Majesty. He did all those things because he did not want to be discovered by other gods. The young man shook his wine glass and spoke with certainty. His words made everyone gasp. To say that those changes have something to do with His Majesty would be more accurate to say that they have more to do with Watson. Strange things have been happening in the kingdom ever since that boy came to the Holy Dragon Kingdom. They say that he was also the one who resurrected Queen Avril. Someone saw a green monster running out of the garden when Queen Avril was resurrected. I wonder if it is true. Someone raised some doubts. Watson did make some changes after he came to the capital, but those changes were all good. For example, the sun fruit wine that I am drinking now. Did the Holy Dragon Kingdom have such wine in the past? Then, there's the platinum tier weapon, the Blessing of the Gods and Demons potion produced by the Abeder family. Have you all heard of those before? Even the river that runs through the royal city and allows one to obtain gold tier strength as long as they consume it. Watson also created that. A few days ago, he made a circle around the kingdom and passed by the planetary fortress in the royal city. Now, there are many divine mountains towering into the clouds outside the royal city. On those mountains, there are trees that look like world trees. You must have seen those changes. During the battle with King Landar III, Watson did not forget to change the Holy Dragon Kingdom's environment. Compared to His Majesty, who only wanted to sit in the supreme position and lead the kingdom into the flames of war, he is much better suited to be the king. The young man slammed his hand on the table and stood up abruptly. He spoke with righteous indignation, and the tavern was already completely silent. What you said makes sense. After a moment, the tavern echoed in agreement. It was true that King Landar III was a king who was good at playing with people's hearts, and the people were not fools. They could sense who was genuinely good to them and who was just using them. I also know some secrets about His Majesty, so I'll take this opportunity to explain them to everyone. Actually, 20 years ago, His Majesty only became king thanks to the help from the Demoness Church. He was also the one who imprisoned the old king. That information was not from the Everything House, but from a friend of mine who was an official in prison. Similar situations were everywhere in the royal city. On a particular main street in the royal city was a building called the Everything House. That building had just been built a few days ago, and once it was built, it sold information at a low price. It attracted many higher UPS and noblemen to go there to buy information. People said that Everything House was a transit station built by the planetary fortress in the royal city. Information was received from all over the kingdom through the planetary fortress and transmitted there. At that moment, the owner of Everything House, a man who was as fat as a mountain of meat, opened his hands to protect the information cabinet behind him. He faced a few assassins dressed in black and had cold expressions on their faces. "Duke Piggy, we are the king's personal guards. We are arresting you on the charge of intentionally spreading rumors and endangering the kingdom's security. Are you aware of your crime?" The lead assassin held the long sword hanging by his waist and took out a pair of handcuffs with his other hand as he approached Duke Piggy. Duke Piggy did not panic at all in the face of that scene. "What crime have I committed?" As one of Watson's newly recruited subordinates, Dina was sent by Watson to be the Planetary Fortress City Lord. He was arranged to be the Everything House's owner, and he was responsible for the exchange of potions every month. He could receive double wages. "Your Excellency Duke Piggy, you're an intelligent person. Let's not beat around the bush. Right now, rumors are spreading all over the royal city. Various people are spreading rumors in the tavern about His Majesty. You must have sent them, right? As long as you admit that you did all that and then accuse Watson of disrespecting His Majesty with the intention of usurping the throne, we can forget about your previous mistakes. When His Majesty convicts Watson, you'll be rewarded." Seeing Duke Piggy's stiff neck and unyielding attitude, a handsome young man walked out from behind the assassins. The young man wore golden armor and looked valiant. If Christina had been present at the time, she would have been surprised to see that young man because he was the assassin who had escaped from the city of Steel Blake. Chapter 618, You Are Not Allowed to Leave. Blake looked at the fat young man in front of him. He had a smile on his face, but he was deep in thought. He knew the person in front of him. He was the eldest son of Lord Constantine. He was initially a good-for-nothing who only knew how to eat. The residents of the royal city had even given him the nickname Duke Piggy. However, when faced with him, Duke Piggy did not panic at all, despite being pointed at with a sword. That level of determination was not something that an ordinary person could possess. He had only followed Watson for a few days, yet he had already made such a huge change. The first time he met Watson was in the City of Steel. He was forced to end the mission of monitoring Christina because of Watson. After that, he went to the floating city and then returned to the royal city. After returning to the royal city, King Landar III did not comment on his previous work. He arranged a job for him to monitor the movements of the various ministers in the royal city. He had long known that Duke Piggy had sent the people from the Everything House to spread rumors about King Landar III in the royal city to sow discord between the king and the ministers. He did not care about it before because Duke Piggy's actions benefited the kingdom. People Duke Piggy could instigate proved that they were not loyal enough to the Holy Dragon Kingdom. After His Majesty dealt with Watson, they could wash the kingdom with those people's blood. However, he could not remain indifferent for long because the rumors were getting more and more ridiculous. At first, the rumor was that the primordial Demoness had possessed King Landar III. Then, it became that King Landar III was infatuated with the primordial Demoness body. Finally, it became that King Landar III was infatuated with the female body. After Queen Avril died, he secretly buried her body in a special coffin so that it would not rot because he had been satisfying his perverted desires with that. Blake was drinking water when he first heard those rumors, and he almost choked to death. He did not know who would spread such ridiculous rumors. He did not know how a person could easily believe those rumors. With no other choice, he began to lead the assassins to capture the rumor mongers, and in the end, they followed the clues and found that place. He still admired Duke Piggy. He was willing to do anything for Watson. That kind of loyalty was very rare. You should surrender. Write down the evidence that Watson instructed you to commit a crime so that I won't kill you. Duke Piggy listened to the words of the handsome young man in front of him. His expression did not waver at all. Surrender? He would not surrender, much less accuse Watson. It was not Watson's order to have the people from the Everything House spread those rumors. The Everything House was an intelligence network that Watson had put a lot of effort into building, and the information that spread from it was essential for authenticity. As an intelligence network, its credibility would be destroyed once the information was degraded. If Watson had known that he had sent people to spread those rumors, he might have punished him. However, Duke Piggy did not regret it. He had lived in ridicule since he was young, even his father was disappointed because of his pig-like body size. In that lifetime, the only people who discovered his brilliance were Dina and Watson. When he first met Watson, he felt a little inferior. Watson was only 12 or 13 years old, and he was already the kingdom's strongest genius. He was young but powerful and full of wisdom. However, after interacting with him, he learned that Watson was an approachable person. He was generous toward others, and he even offered him a high salary of 1,000,000 gold coins a month. When he received the first sum of gold from Watson and brought it home, he still remembered that it was the first time his father was surprised by his ability. It was also the first time he saw his father hiding in the study and crying. He kept saying, "There is hope for the future of the family." Ever since then, he had made up his mind to follow Watson for the rest of his life. No matter what Watson wanted to do, he would try his best to help him achieve it. It was such a lucky thing to have someone he wanted to follow in his life. After learning that King Landar III was fighting Watson, the Constantine family did not express their stance. They tacitly agreed that he would continue to stay in the Everything House. It was obvious that they had decided to stand on Watson's side. Duke Piggy did not have any fear at that moment. Retracing the thoughts that kept surging in his mind, he cracked his neck. The bones in his body emitted a crisp sound. "I won't surrender. If you want to capture me, then come at me." He had taken the dragon transformation potion and could transform into a diamond-tier god-eating dragon. The assassins in front of him looked like they were only at the peak of gold tier. They were no match for him. What a pity! Blake threw the broken platinum tier longsword onto the ground. He wiped the blood from the fractured armor on his chest and panted as he retreated. In front of him, Duke Piggy was lying on the ground. His body was full of blades. His eyes rolled upward, it was obvious that he had fainted. "Blake, it took you so long to catch a criminal. If it weren't for my help, you would have failed. As an assassin, that is a great dereliction of duty. Should I report that to His Majesty?" Not far behind Duke Piggy, a woman with revealing clothes and a beautiful face sat on the table with her legs crossed. Her long and fair legs attracted the attention of all the assassins in the room, but they did not dare to look at her. They knew that the woman was one of King Landar III's top assassins. She was known as the torture tool. Her strength was at peak platinum tier. Before she killed anyone, she liked to torture them with tools. Even though she was only platinum tier, she possessed assassination techniques and poison. She could even kill a diamond tier elite. King Landar III previously controlled the top assassins, and they did not know each other. However, they were connected at that moment because of the extraordinary times. There were many powerful assassins under the command of King Landar III. On the surface, Sword Saint Reed was the strongest in the Holy Dragon Kingdom, but in fact, he was not. "Lady Torture Tool, don't make fun of me. I'm only a speck of gold, and my strength, of course, pales in comparison to yours." Blake smiled wryly. The torturer appeared to be very happy. "Leave that to me. You guys go do something else first. Before I kill that fat pig, I want to play with him first. Where should I start dissecting him later? Seeing that he has so much meat on him, it should be enough for me to play with him for a while. After His Majesty kills Watson, I want to chop that fat pig and the kingdom's strongest genius into specimens. That scene should be very striking." "Yes." Blake's lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but he did not say anything in the end. He just nodded and walked out. At that moment, Duke Piggy, who had fainted on the ground, seemed to have heard something. His fingers moved, and his arm supported his body as he struggled to get up from the ground. He coughed up blood as he shouted in a hoarse voice. "Wait, you're not allowed to. Go. Chapter 619, Pacifying the Riot. Hey, that fellow's body has been stabbed several times by a platinum-tier weapon smeared with lethal poison. How can he still get up? The torturer jumped down from the table and raised her right leg. She was wearing a high-heeled boot. She stepped on the wound on Duke Piggy's back and crushed it. The wound was stimulated, and Duke Piggy spat out another mouthful of blood. His head was covered in a cold sweat, and his body trembled like a leaf. Duke Piggy, don't stand up again. Blake also had a pained expression on his face. He had a hunch that Duke Piggy was only pretending to be unconscious. After all, Duke Piggy's body fat was so thick that even if he had been stabbed a few times by a torture tool, he would not have fainted. He had pretended to faint, so why did he have to stand up then? What kind of belief supported Duke Piggy? I can't let you go because you just said you wanted to make a specimen of young Master Watson. Pieces of organs appeared in Duke Piggy's blood that he coughed up. His internal organs had been severely damaged, and he might die if not treated in time. You got up just for that. The torturer's feet rubbed against Duke Piggy's back, and she laughed shrilly. That is too funny. You can't even protect yourself, yet you still have the strength to care about others? I'll finish you off now because you're such a moron. Later, I'll cut your body into pieces and send it to the border. I'll let Watson take a good look and see what he thinks. The blade that was constantly rotating in her palm stopped. The torturer held it down fiercely, and the blade pierced Duke Piggy's neck. Obviously, she wanted to cut off Duke Piggy's head like cutting poultry. However, her idea did not work. The blade stopped at the back of Duke Piggy's neck and made a crisp sound. The blade collided with the skin, but it bent the blade, almost breaking it. What's going on? The torturer seemed shocked, and her eyes widened. Young Master Watson said that my ability is very strong, stronger than I would ever imagine. I believe his words, so you will see my full strength soon. Material conversion, muscle conversion. Duke Piggy roared. He supported his body with his arms and stood up from the ground, bouncing the torture instrument on his body. At that moment, his entire body was surrounded by white smoke, and his skin was red. The muscles under his skin were like firewood being burned as fuel. Veins twisted and crawled all over his body, bouncing rhythmically. Duke Piggy had been more than 2 meters tall and full of fat. However, in just a few seconds, all the fat on his body had disappeared, turning him into a normal-sized boy with thick eyebrows and big eyes, and he was almost 2 meters tall. The thin Duke Piggy was quite handsome. Unfortunately, no one paid attention to his appearance. Everyone felt a surge of power bursting from Duke Piggy's body. That power was so mighty that it shook the ground. Cracks appeared on the ground like an earthquake, continuously spreading in all directions. What on earth is that? The assassins could not stand steadily and cried out in surprise as they retreated. Young Master Watson told me that I have the ability to convert matter. I can create anything that I've eaten. The most powerful thing I've eaten in my life is the potion that young Master Watson had given me. Now, I've replaced all the blood in my body with a solution called the Ascension Potion. In other words, I can now display the strength of a god. Opening his mouth, smoke spread from both sides of Duke Piggy's mouth. His eyes were emitting a blazing light, and the whites of his eyes could no longer be seen. Since his body could not withstand the effects of a large amount of the Ascension Potion, his muscles were dissolving. The powerful force would vaporize his body in a few minutes. He did not care about that. He did not need a few minutes. 1 second was enough. Since you dare to slander young Master Watson, you shall pay for your sins in hell. Raising his right fist, Duke Piggy punched the ground fiercely. With the omnipotent house as the course, the ground of almost the entire Holy Dragon Royal City caved in. Lava spewed from the shattered ground. The terrifying power turned into a hurricane that blew in all directions. The gold-tier assassin did not even have time to resist before he was blown away by the storm, landing heavily on the ground and turning into meat paste. Even the torture tool, who had the strength of a platinum tier elite, could not withstand the power of that punch. The wind twisted the muscles on her face, and even her gums were exposed. While she was at a loss of what to do, Duke Piggy threw another punch in her direction. As the punch landed, a ravine appeared on the ground. The punch shattered the city wall in the south of the Holy Dragon Kingdom. The ravine stretched out beyond the city wall and stretched for an unknown distance. The torture tool in the range of the punch was long gone. With just 2 punches, all the assassins except Blake were killed. Blake did not die, but it was not because he was powerful. It was because Duke Piggy deliberately avoided his body when he threw the punch. Even so, the armor on his body was completely shattered. I won't kill you because you just persuaded me. I'm here to ask you if you want to surrender and write down the crimes of King Landar III. If you can do it, I can spare your life. Every pore on Duke Piggy's body was shooting light. Standing in the ruins, he clenched his fists like a god. The corner of Blake's lips twitched a few times. He slumped to the ground and raised his hands. I surrender. Duke Piggy was stunning and enviable. He did not know if everyone who had faith could do that. Blake was not sure because he never had faith. He followed King Landar III because he was the king, and if he did not become an assassin, he would be killed. He wanted to live, but Duke Piggy was not like that. He did not know why their lives were so different. If he was not an assassin of King Landar III but Watson's subordinate, would he have to suppress his emotions? Would he get to see a different scene? Dina. Your father is about to die, but where are you? They say that girls are unreliable, I should have married her off earlier. Why would Watson fight with King Landar III? Why wouldn't he just kneel and die? In Dina's family mansion, her gambler father was kneeling on the ground with tears streaming down his face. 2 platinum tier swords were placed against his neck. The curses did not make the cold-faced soldiers in front of them merciful. Instead, they read out his crimes and increased the strength of their blades. Your daughter, Dina, has defected to the rebel Watson, which has had a negative impact on the Holy Dragon Kingdom. Therefore, your entire family must be executed immediately. What's the use of complaining now? By the way, I'm not from here. I'm just here to see if Dina has returned. I have nothing to do with this. Please let me go. That person was the man he had wanted to sell Dina to. He had been trying to apologize to Dina to ease their relationship. Who would have thought that he would be caught the moment he arrived? The platinum tier swords crossed and were about to cut off their necks. At that moment, the air twisted, and a beautiful girl appeared with the light of a teleportation array. The moment she appeared, a powerful force swept out in all directions, sending a few soldiers flying. Even the platinum tier swords in their hands shattered. Dina, you're here, the man shouted. After Dina appeared, she clapped her hands. The light of the teleportation array under her feet grew even brighter. The members of the planetary fortress, led by Fox, emerged. After they came out, they looked around and muttered, "This is Miss Dina's home. Quick! Take those soldiers down. We can't let them bully Miss Dina's family." A group of people rushed out. Dina tidied the hat on her head and turned to her father. "Father, how have you been?" "Dina, you've arrived at the right time. Please save us. Those people are crazy." "Father, I thought I heard you talking bad about me and young Master Watson. I didn't want to come, but young Master Watson told me to protect my family. Now it seems like I should not have come." "What nonsense are you talking about? I didn't say anything bad about Watson. You must have heard wrong. I have always thought Watson is extraordinarily talented and is the best candidate for our future king." Dina's father's expression was stiff as he explained hurriedly. Then, he stood up and said, quickly, "Take us away from here. Did you capture the hearts of those men? Can they escort us out of the city?" "Father, don't worry. The riots in the royal city have been quelled. Almost all of King Landar III's underlings have been subdued. Even without my help, you can still get out. Furthermore, those people aren't men I've captured. If I had to say it, they are the Planetary Fortress Generals, and I am now the Planetary Fortress City Lord. Chapter 620, A Noble King or a Despicable Man? What are you doing at the border, Sylvan? Are you rebelling? In the royal palace in the capital, Hone was tied to a chair. The rope that bound him was not made of ordinary materials but magic. Hone struggled violently and glared at the man with purple hair and elven ears in front of him. He had planned to lead the army in the palace to attack and eliminate all the forces related to the Watson family. However, before he could leave, he was controlled by Sylvan. If it were in the past, he would still have the strength to fight against the most powerful mage in the Holy Dragon Kingdom. However, the other party had just said, "Absolute explosion." Then, he was blown away and lost consciousness. When he woke up, he was already there. "General Hone, don't be so agitated." "Yes, I am rebelling. The era of King Landar III has long passed. It is a fantasy for him to dream of becoming a king and controlling everything." Sylvan's expression was cold and contained anger. "What I can't stand is that he attacked my master, Antonio. If my master were injured, I would never let him go." "Sylvan, I did not expect you to know about that. Did Watson tell you?" "No, I told him." A gentle female voice interrupted Hone. A woman with snow-white hair wearing a black bamboo hat walked out of the palace. The woman had pointy ears. Her snow-white hair fluttered in the wind, looking very beautiful. "Queen Avril." Hone was stunned. He never thought that Avril, King Landar III's most loved person, would appear in his camp. "Why? Friar has already made a lot of mistakes. We can't let him continue to make more mistakes." Avril looked sorrowful. "If His Majesty knew that you betrayed him, he would be furious. He did all that so that he could live with you." "No, he did not do it for me. He did it for himself. If he really did it to resurrect me, he should have stopped after I woke up." Avril interrupted Hone. "Resurrecting me was just his obsession. Maybe he doesn't feel like I've been successfully resurrected. Watson used the power of the human race chess piece to reshape my soul and used life energy to recreate my body. I have the same memories and emotions as the past me. But am I really the same person?" Hone fell silent. "Just like how I'm different from the past, Friar is no longer the same. It was my death that caused him to become like this. I could not stop it at that time, but now I want to change everything. The mistakes that have been made can't be undone. The only thing we can do is not let the tragedy continue to unfold." "Augustus, what are you doing? Are you rebelling?" Initially, there should have been a fierce battle in the Saint Laurent family. However, at that moment, all the members of the Ptolemy and Campbell families were lying on the ground, and Armand was breathing rapidly. He stared at Augustus, who had used his strength to suppress everyone and keep them on the ground. "Grandfather, I'm sorry. You've paid a huge price to use the holy relic to modify me, but in the end, I used that power on you guys." Augustus' muscles flickered with a metallic luster, and circular airwaves were released in all directions from his body. Those airwaves were the ability of a holy relic to contain hundreds of times the gravity. It was enough to push those below platinum tier to the ground. "I didn't expect that the Campbell family's genius was actually on Watson's side. I remember that you and Watson have fought many times before. You should have a grudge against him." The old king was not pressed to the ground, but he did not move against Augustus either. He only spoke with interest. "I hate Watson. I hate that he will come out and cause trouble every time I do something. I hate that he is very talented in all aspects and can suppress me. But I choose to defeat him head-on and not use despicable methods like you guys." Augustus puffed out his chest and spoke it in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. "How ambitious! I haven't heard such foolish and self-righteous words for a long time. The old king narrowed his eyes and smiled. No matter what the method is used, the one who will win is the king. No matter how many beautiful words you say, no one will remember you. It's not too late to regret now. I can pretend that I didn't hear what you just said. As long as Watson dies, you will be the strongest genius in the kingdom. He chose to induce instead of starting a war because the old king knew that Augustus's strength was not inferior to his. He was already old, and Augustus was still young, so there was no need to overthink the outcome. Of course, I know that principle. Do I need you to teach me that? Just as he was thinking of using words to move Augustus, the old king did not expect Augustus to curl his lips and snort coldly. It's not like I've never used despicable methods against Watson. If it worked, he would have died long ago. I only chose to confront him head-on because I knew that those methods would be useless against him. You sounded more imposing when I said that just now, yet you insisted on exposing me. What's wrong with you? From now on, you should shut up and don't speak anymore. That. The old king was shocked. The three families there were also petrified when they heard that, unable to say a word. At the border. At that moment, the battle had reached its climax. The members of the Demoness bandit gang had joined hands with Nia and were engaged in a fierce fight with the Primordial Demoness. The Demoness bandit gang leaders were all wounded, but none of them retreated despite suffering severe injuries. Many of the Primordial Demoness eyes were also frozen into ice cubes by Nia's molecular deceleration. The Death Dragon King, Nidhogg, single-handedly stopped the monster that had merged with the God Slayer's blood. The rest of the people surrounded Watson and Frigga in the middle. King Landar III, or Miss Frigga, is a general. Right now, you don't have any ability to resist. There were 3 peak-tier starlight items behind Watson: the Limitless Compass, the Wheel of Reversal, and the Book of Wisdom. His body crossed time and space with a simple step to arrive in front of Frigga and threw a punch. Frigga's red hair fluttered in the wind as she stared at Watson. The air turned into solid rocks that blocked Watson's punch while she retreated 100 meters away. That might not be the case. I still have a trump card that I haven't used yet. Frigga's expression was relaxed. She was in the starlight tier. Even though Watson's attacks were powerful, their life forms were different. He was unable to harm her foundation. As a god, her body contained an enormous amount of energy comparable to a planet. If any of that energy were scattered, she would be able to revive herself. The trump card you spoke of is to delay me and have your subordinates capture the people on my side in the Holy Dragon Kingdom to threaten me. Watson's expression was cold as he opened his right hand and said, "It's useless. Your plan has already failed." A magic light screen appeared in his hand. It split into several pieces, reflecting the scenes of different regions in the Holy Dragon Kingdom. The assassins under Frigga's command were eliminated, and the army was also controlled. It was not only the capital but also the other cities. Frigga's expression changed. She knew that Watson did not use magic to fake the scene. That was what happened in the Holy Dragon Kingdom. Holding Watson and letting her subordinates massacre the Holy Dragon Kingdom was one of her plans, indeed. She did not expect Watson to see through it. It doesn't matter. They're just a bunch of stupid rejects. As long as I ascend to a high position, they'll still grovel on the ground and lick my boots. Waving her hand nonchalantly, Frigga's hair broke free and turned into a giant python that opened its mouth to swallow Watson. He managed to dodge it and shook his head. "No, Frigga, you've already lost. From the moment you lost the support of the people. A throne without the support of the people is just an empty shell, just like a tower without a base. You can't be despicable to the people. Don't you understand such a simple principle?" "That's right, Watson. I am despicable, and you are noble. It is precisely because you are noble that you have fallen into this situation. I am too lazy to waste my breath on you. Did you feel that I have no trump cards left? I will show you." Frigga sneered as she stretched her right hand outward. A golden light flashed in her hand, and a female baby appeared in it. It was crying loudly, and it looked like Watson's sister, Jean. The primordial Demoness has the yin elemental power, and your mother just happened to give birth to a girl after the yin elemental magical source was restored. I have planned for that. I have injected the baby's body with a large amount of yin elemental power. If I move my fingers, I can crush her to her death. Choose, Watson. Do you want to be a noble king or a despicable person who can save your sister?